begin with the Treasurer's Report for the month of February 2014. Cash receipts in the current fund for the period February 1st through February 28th, 2014 were $3,555,970.31. The cash balance in the current fund as of this period totaled $8,587,186.44. And the cash balance in the water utility account as of February 28th, 2014 was $1,437,007.69, submitted by our treasurer, Shari Bowler. Moving on to department reports, I'll begin with the budget. We are prepared this evening to introduce our 2014 municipal budget for calendar year 2014. Having a report, we are on time this year. It's been a while since we've actually been on time like this. I think last year, due to a hold-up and waiting for the state for a community development loan that we were waiting on, we were unable to introduce our budget until June. So I'm very happy to say we're introducing this evening, and we will have the public hearing and hopefully the final passage of the budget next month in April. Before I get into the numbers, I just want to express this has been a rather unusual budget, and it'll become more enlightening as I move further into it. In terms of normal operating expenses, it's really unremarkable. If anything, it's probably in most respects lower than recent budgets in terms of that. There have been, in the last few years, by negotiated contracts and other changes that in terms of health insurance, that many of the expenses, whether they be salary and wages or health benefits, have been curbed. So while those did go up in this budget, they have not gone up nearly as much as they have in last year, in most recent years. In fact, the overall salaries, I think, went up less than 2% in this budget. The employees each year are paying a greater portion of the health insurance bill, so even though that did go up, it has not gone up as much as it has in recent years. So I should be reporting very good news, but the other part of the budget is the more difficult part, and that is the Sandy-related expenses. And we are now, I think we're 16 months past the event. When we put the budget together last year, there were very high expectations, at least on our part, in that between the insurance companies and FEMA, that many of our expenses would be reimbursed and coming back. Slowly, reality is creeping in, and yes, we are getting some monies, but certainly not anywhere near the amount we need. And as the expenses tally up, starting with the cleanup back 16 months ago, and now we were able to get the town looking nice. We got the season off the ground. Over the last off-season, we've now started preparations for putting buildings back in place and all that, and it all costs money. We have borrowed a rather large sum of money. I'm not going to go into the details of that. That'll be for the public hearing next month. I'll have my finance people here to better explain that. But we have spent a lot of time looking not just at this budget, but what the budgets of the next couple of years are going to be. And while I could have put blinders on and recommended to the council that we simply put together a normal budget and move ahead with business as normal, that would not have been a wise move, because again, there is a great deal of money that we are going to be owing in the coming years. So we thought it prudent, my finance people and myself, that we recommend to the council that we begin paying some of those things off starting this year and moving forward for the next few years. Again, we're still hopeful that we'll be getting more FEMA money and more insurance money this year and the following year, but we need to make some payments on our own. And by payments, what do I mean? I mean paying down, first of all, the shortages in what we anticipated in FEMA funding. Last year, we thought we were being conservative, and we anticipated $900,000 in FEMA-related revenue. We came up $145,000 short. What does that do? That means there's $145,000 less of our surplus that we can apply to this year's budget. Same thing with the debt. I mean, we've taken out long-term notes that we'll be paying off over the next 10 years. We need to start paying those. Again, that's to basically pay off storm-related debt. So that being said, for calendar year 2014 budget, what this contains is the first payment of what we term the FEMA share. Even under the best circumstances, we are still obligated to a minimum of 10% of our FEMA-related expenses. Debris alone, from what I understand from the county, who picked up the cost of the contract, they spent over $3 million removing debris from Beach Haven. So that in itself would be a $300,000 payment, and it rolls on from there. So for this year, what we put in the budget towards the FEMA share, and I see it going forward for subsequent years, $112,500. Again, this is over and above what our normal expenses would be. The larger number being storm debt. We're putting in $280,000 towards the storm, reducing some of the storm debt. Again, this is just the beginning going forward. And I actually just jumped over what I should have started with, which was our normal expenses. Our normal expenses, considering what I just said, are going to be rather small. Salary and wages went up $56,000. I think that's about 1.4%. The insurance expenses went up $87,000. I think this is the first time in recent memory where insurance expenses haven't been, triple digits. Our monies towards our debt service only went up $33,000. So our normal operating expenses went up $176,000. However, we have another almost $400,000 in payments that we have to incorporate in this budget. Moving on to the revenue portion, I'm happy to report that we were relatively happy and very good in terms of our taking in our revenue for 2013. We were very conservative when we put together our revenue expectations, not knowing who would be here for the season. Our beach badges were down slightly, our boat revenue was down slightly, our tennis courts, and all the recreational type things, but all told, I think we were only down about $85,000 of over $500,000 in revenue, so we were rather pleased with that. Also happy to say, unlike a lot of municipalities, the majority of our homeowners have remained current with their tax payments. So we are still at over a 98% tax collection rate. So again, we're solid when it comes to revenue, which is a good thing moving forward. Changes from last year's revenue and this year's budget, we're anticipating an additional $128,000 in local revenue that we're not able to expect in last year's budget. We increased the amount of monies very conservatively we anticipate from the construction code. We took in, I think, an additional $110,000 in construction code fees last year. Again, a very good thing, indicating people are investing in Beach Haven, are rebuilding their homes. But as I indicated earlier in my talk here, the surplus, we have $200,000 less in surplus to anticipate in this budget than last year's budget. And again, that has to be made up. So the net change of revenues from this year compared to last year is a negative $62,000, which brings us down to the bottom line, which is the amount to be raised by taxation, which is once you get done with revenues from other sources, the balance the budget has to come from the amount to be raised by taxation. This year we're looking at an amount to be raised by taxation of $7,058,935. This represents an increase over the year 2013 of $663,765. A rather substantial increase, I must admit. Probably I would say probably the largest one during my tenure here. What that translates in terms of the local tax rate would be an increase of 4 cents, which would take the local rate up to 42.92 cents for the 2014 year. Our library appropriation only went up to about $4,000. That is carried separately now. I think that started about 3 years ago. This year, the amount required by the state formula to support the local Beach Haven Library will be $655,725. Moving on to our water utility. Our water utility is in a surprisingly good financial footing. I say that because, I don't know if everybody's aware, but for calendar year 2013, we were unable, except for the fourth quarter, to bill for water in terms of the metered rate. We had a bill simply the standard $125 per quarter. Even the fourth quarter revenues, that's why I wasn't counting them in my head, fourth quarter revenues, even though they're for the fourth quarter, they're all counted toward 2014 budget. The total appropriations that we're asking this year to support the water utility will be $1,783,825. That is a no change from last year. No change at all. It's exactly the same as 2013. You say, well, how could we possibly do that? We made a couple of adjustments. The appropriations did go up by a little over $90,000, that being for salary and wages and operating expenses. However, we're a little more further ahead in terms of getting our water utility put back together, so we were able to cut the capital improvement fund by $90,000, which is basically a no-impact type of thing. On the revenue side, we're anticipating $150,000 less in FEMA revenue than we had anticipated last year. Again, because most of our projects are already in the works. However, because the meters are back on again, we're anticipating an additional $150,000 in water rent. So again, it's a no-impact sort of thing. So the water utility is in very good shape. Moving on to some other things. Talking about projects, if anybody's been down the beachfront on Center Street, our old lifeguard headquarters came down. Midwest Construction, who we awarded a bid last month, has already started the project. They're starting to drive the pilings for the new structure, and we're very happy to report that the project is on target and should be open in time for the 2014 summer season. As I just mentioned before, the water utility, we had anticipated also taking down a water plant and putting a new one up. However, we've been held up getting some permits from the state DEP. In fact, we still do not have the green light to go ahead with the project. So Frank Little, our borough engineer, and myself and Mayor Keeler sat down about that last week, and we decided, we're already into March, that it may be the prudent thing, given that we are anticipating a much larger influx of people this year, that we put the water plant project on hold until September. I mean, we will still be going ahead and getting the bids. However, the contractor will not start work until after the season. This will allow the water plant, as it presently is, which is running fine, to continue to run on an uninterrupted service and deliver the needed water for the season. The last item is our Borough Hall. I know there have been a number of questions. People have posed to me privately about Borough Hall, what's going on, why are we still at the EOC. We have submitted another grant application for this facility. It's the same grant application that we had submitted back in the fall, which we didn't hear yay or nay on that. It was just basically silence. However, they did send us a packet, this being the state of New Jersey, for a second round of funding for what they term the State Neighborhood and Community Revitalization Program. The packet's a little more complete than the first one. It has a point system that you have to make a certain level in order to continue with the application process. We spent about 2 hours on Friday afternoon putting this together. The application itself is due this Wednesday. From what I understand, of the $50 million in the original grant program, they had only distributed about $2.5 million, so most of the money is still there, $47.5 million to be exact. We're hopeful we can participate in some of that. We're submitting an estimated construction cost of $5 million. We don't anticipate that to be the full amount of the Borough Hall. However, there is a certain percentage of that we have to anticipate funding. Whether we fund it or not, it remains to be seen, but we're hoping that of that amount, we're asking for $3.5 million from the state for this project. Have our fingers crossed that we will meet a little more success this go-ahead. If not, I guess then we're going to have to come to some conclusion of what we want to do in terms of getting our operations back to Borough Hall. We do anticipate meeting with our state senator and the two assembly people to ask their assistance, because we're not, immune to the fact that it is a political process, and certainly if our local state delegation would have put in a good word for us, perhaps the project may actually move ahead. And that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you, Rich.